Hi everyone and welcome back to Speak Like a Leader. Today I've created this short video because I'd like to take you through some relatively simple words that do tend to get confused. These are words that you can use in your everyday language but also at work. So let's go through these set of words and make sure that we know exactly when to use which one. Let's start with the words client versus customer. When do we use the word client and when do we use the word customer? So customer is the more generic word. You can use the word customer for anyone who buys goods or services. So whether you're selling a product or you're offering a service, when somebody comes into your store, you can say that I'm offering these customers, for example, discounts. I'm offering discounts to loyal customers. However, be careful with the word client. The word client is only used for someone who receives professional services. So a lawyer has clients, a hairdresser has clients. For example, the lawyer's clients appreciated her dedication. Now, yesterday, one of my students asked me what the difference is between a person and an individual, and could he use them synonymously. Now, a person is a general reference. It refers to any human being. For example, a kind person helped me find my way. An individual is usually used when we're talking about a single member of a group, and often when we're speaking formally. So each individual has unique strengths, or specific individuals in this group were offering their opinions in last year's meeting. Okay. Economical versus financial. This is a tricky one. Now, economical, you can have it in your mind as something that is value for money, not necessarily cheap, but value for money. It's cost effective, it's efficient. When you want to go and buy a car and you don't want to spend too much money for something that's not worth it, you can say, this car is economical and uses less fuel. Whereas financial is only used when you're talking about finances or money. The company faces financial challenges. Is that clear? Profit versus revenue. Profit is the financial gain after expenses are deducted. So a company makes a specific amount of money. After you deduct all its costs, its expenses, what you get is your profit. For example, the company reported a significant profit this quarter, whereas revenue is the total income generated before expenses have been deducted. For example, the revenue increased by 10% due to higher sales. What is the difference between the words job and role? So I see that some people use these words interchangeably when they shouldn't, because a job is a specific position. For example, he accepted a job in the marketing department. So your job is your position. You're in the finance department, the marketing department, the sales department. Whereas your role is your set of responsibilities within your job. For example, her role involves managing client accounts. If your job is a sales manager, your role involves taking care of your clients and selling products or services. Layoff versus termination. Now, in both cases, unfortunately, you lose your job. However, there is a difference between these two words. A layoff happens when you lose your job because of external factors, like downsizing. The company announced layoffs due to reduced demand. So because the company is not doing well, they had to let some people go. Termination is when you lose your job due to performance issues. When you are not performing your job well enough, the employee faced termination for breaching company policies. What is the difference between an invoice and a receipt? They are both proof of payment. So they're documents that suggest a proof of payment. When do we use each one? So a receipt is when we just buy goods and services. You go to a shop, you buy something, you get a receipt for reimbursement purposes. An invoice is given to you by a vendor. So it's usually given from one business to another. The vendor sent an invoice for the delivered items. Affect versus effect. Okay, obviously one is a verb and the other is a noun. So to affect means to influence or change something. The speech deeply affected the audience. It influenced the audience. Whereas effect is a noun and it's the result of a change. For instance, the new policy had a positive or a negative effect. Stationary versus stationary. As you see, they have identical pronunciation, but that doesn't mean that they mean the same thing. So stationary with an A is something that's not moving or fixed in place. For example, the train remained stationary for an hour. It didn't move. Whereas stationary with an E includes writing materials like paper and pens. I bought some beautiful stationery for my office. Principal versus principal. Principal is the head of a school. For example, the school principal introduced new rules to the students. Whereas principle, the second word, is the fundamental truth or belief about something. For example, honesty is a core principle in our company. It's a core value, a core belief. All together versus all together. Now, do these two things actually have a difference? And yes, they do. When we have the word together, so all together, it means completely or entirely. For example, the idea seemed altogether impractical, completely impractical. Whereas when we split these two words and we say all together, it means everyone or everything in one place. We were all together for the meeting. Everybody was there. Complement versus complement. So the first one is something that completes something or enhances it. For instance, the new curtains in my house complement the decor. They look nice together. Whereas a compliment is a kind or a flattering remark that you make towards some other person. For example, she received a compliment on her presentation, or she received a compliment on her appearance. This one is a set of words that I see so often mistaken, both in its pronunciation, in the way people write it, and the way they use it. So let's make sure that we clear things up. Advice is the noun. Advice is written with a C and it's pronounced advice. And this is a recommendation or guidance. She gave me excellent advice about my career. On the other hand, to advise is a verb. Its pronunciation sounds like a Z, so to advise, and it means to recommend or suggest. I advise you to submit the report today. So one is advice, the other is advise. Here's another interesting word that changes meaning if we split it up. Everyday versus every day. So every day is an adjective, something ordinary or common. These are my everyday shoes. Whereas every day means each day. For example, I go for a walk every day, or I have to go to the office every single day. Moving on, we see the words to ensure and insure. What's the difference here? To ensure means to make sure, to make certain. Please ensure the document is signed. Please ensure that you leave the documents in my office. To insure means to protect financially. I need to insure my car against accidents. I need to insure my house against earthquakes. This next word is actually quite funny when used incorrectly because the difference of meaning is so significant. The pronunciation is exactly the same. Well, it has a small little difference. So one is desert, the other is dessert. So the intonation is on the first E in the first case and on the second E in the second case. And also, one has one S, the other has a double S. Let's see the differences. A desert with one S and the intonation on the first E is a dry area, for example, in Egypt. Camels are commonly found in the desert. If you add an S and also push the intonation to the second E, you have the word dessert, which is a sweet course after a meal. Ice cream, for example, is my favorite dessert. So careful you don't mix these up. Now, you might find yourself in a presentation, for example, trying to describe some historic moments in the past. Now, careful whether you use the word historic or historical. Historic is something important in history, the signing of a treaty or the signing of an agreement in your company. Okay, whereas historical is something relating to history. The museum displays historical artifacts. Now, let's remind ourselves of this very important distinction. I'm sure that even your primary teacher, when you were a kid, was talking about the difference of these two words, the words to borrow and to lend. Let's be clear. When I borrow something, I take something for temporary use. Whereas when I lend something, I give something for temporary use. So you can say, can I borrow your book for the weekend because you're taking it from somebody else, but I will lend you my pen because I am giving something to someone else. Right, 2 more sets of words to go. Let's start with few versus less. Now, before we go there, let me remind you what uncountable and countable nouns are. When we're talking about countable nouns, we're talking about nouns that change in their plural form. For example, the word student becomes students, whereas the word sugar doesn't change in the plural form. So, when we have countable nouns, we use the word few. Few students attended the lecture. When we have an uncountable noun like sugar, you use the word less. This recipe uses less sugar. And let's move to the last set of words, to accept versus accept. To accept is a verb, which means to agree or receive something. She accepted the job offer. Whereas to accept, which sounds a little bit the same, is something completely different. It means to exclude something. So everyone came except John. Everyone was invited to the meeting except Peter. So let's be clear that precision in words, in the word choice, enhances your clarity. Be very, very careful not to confuse these words in the future because it not only changes the meaning of your entire sentence, but it can also sound quite unprofessional. Imagine using the word desert instead of dessert and tell a customer, what would you like for dessert? That would be a little bit weird. So you should regularly practice in order to ensure that you're confident using these words and also apply what you've learned in this lesson in real life situations. I hope you found this lesson helpful. If you did, kindly subscribe to this channel to gain access to many, many more interesting lessons in order to improve your grammar and vocabulary in business English situations. Have a nice day and see you in the next lesson.